Okay, I wanted to do this video about what's going on in Los Angeles, because I know for those of you, if you don't live out here, um, I feel like different things are happening in different cities and states, and what your news station, if you watch the news that comes on locally, it tells you something different or similar based on what your governor and whatever policies are handed down, laws, whatever governing conditions that are handed down to your governor and your mayors from your different states are given. So what's happening, where my point is whatever's happening in, for example, say Louisiana, might be similar to what's happening in Los Angeles, but it may have happened sooner there or later. And so you don't see what's really happening because you're not checking necessarily. If we're in LA, you're not really checking for all the other places like that, unless you know somebody personally or you have relatives that live there and they're calling you and telling you what happened directly. And that seems to be the case. And what I was looking at this morning, there was this guy, and he has a YouTube channel, and he was saying that 300,000 residents in Louisiana were about to be evicted, and they were about to lose their apartments, their houses, and it was because they were doing all of the social distancing, following the rules, and they were staying home, and they locked down the jobs, and a lot of the jobs couldn't operate because they didn't have safety measures in place, or it just wasn't a safe environment to work in because you're in a crowded space around a lot of different people. And so they had to close those businesses. And so that's happening in a lot of places. And some people are effectively trying to work around those things to make, to revamp their businesses to make things safer, while others, maybe they couldn't stay afloat. Financially, it put a strain on them and business closed permanently. Or you have some businesses that they're in limbo. They don't know if they're going to be able to survive all of this. And that also affects the workers. The number of people that apply for unemployment, you still have a lot of high unemployment out there. And so people are really at the mercy of the government making decisions on what goes and what stays. And so what I've discovered in hearing that, and in looking at some of the various articles in other places where they said some people are already being evicted, is I feel this is what's going on. Now, you tell me if this doesn't make sense to you. They knew they were going to have to let this moratorium go because it's only temporary, and they don't have the money to cover all of these people. And they already act like they don't want to do anything with the stimulus. So think about all these people that, are behind in rent because of the pandemic. And think about, all of the evictions that are halted and all of these properties that need to pay. The stimulus is probably going to protect the landlords more than it will the tenants. And people that are homeowners might get a little more protection than renters. And I'm going to tell you what I believe is happening is they're trying to, hold this thing out until election. And they want you to vote for these same people again. And once you vote for them, in virtually everywhere, you're going to see this large pool of evictions that have happened in all these different cities and states. And you're going to look up and realize that the very people that you voted for are the ones that let the net slip right out from under your feet. And I was thinking about that. I was like, they can't. This is a moratorium. It's temporary. and they go month to month, and they're just basically you're being held on with a lifeline of a net, and it's your safety net right now. But once you vote for these people, come November or whenever the voting takes place, and once whomever it's going to be, they're going to pull these nets right out from under your feet. And whatever happens, happens, because they're already in office. They already, it's already set in stone who's going to take the reins and who's going to be in these seats and who's going to be calling the shots. And I feel like the net is being slowly pulled out from under different cities, different places, and they're waiting to see what reactions are going to be. But I'm going to tell you this. Honestly, I don't think anything is going to be good out of any of this. Some people say, oh, maybe there's a silver lining. At this point, the way I'm looking at it, it doesn't look like there's any silver lining. The only thing that I know that I did read could be anywhere near to this is, and that won't come until like maybe the end of 2021. Fossey is saying that they will probably more than likely come up with a mass production of vaccine. That will pose another issue in and of itself. It's the cost. It's going to be an issue for some people, if there is any at all. And it might be an emergency distribution of it because the fact that this caused a pandemic and they're looking at rebuilding the economy again because of the damage that has been created from the tsunami of evictions and the closed businesses and the economic fallout from these companies and the lawsuits that are going to pretty much take effect. And then you're going to have mass chaos. You're going to have a lot of homelessness. They're going to have to probably set up tables. They're going to have to set up clinics that are going to have to go and be like maybe in a convention center or a large stadium area to deal with the case by case eviction situations to see if they can help those that may have a chance to get out of their situation or may have some other options. They're going to have like maybe lawyer clinics and what have you. And some of that has already taken place in other areas, believe it or not. And I believe it's coming to LA soon. And what's going to happen is you're going to have more protests, civil unrest, because people feel like they've been wronged. Some people are not really getting the response from the EDD like they would want. There's a backlog in mail at the post office. There are places here in Los Angeles where people haven't received mail in weeks and months. Believe it or not, I don't know if anybody else anywhere else has experienced this, but there are people literally going to their postal office, standing in line, waiting just to receive their regular weekly or daily mail. It is affecting us like that here in Los Angeles and some places, South LA especially, where people are every day, they're having to bring their ID, they're having to stand in long lines, social distance just to get their mail. We have places where there's stores, if it goes to the number of 6 and beyond, then the lines wrap around the building. The DMV, you don't even want to know what that's looking like. It already was a mess. And it was frustrating when there was no pandemic. But now that this pandemic has come, I know someone who has to make an appointment for the end of this month just to get a chance to go into the DMV. The DMV is swamped with people, and if you go there, there are lines wrapped around the building. It's crazy, and then people are standing there. Some start off as early as the DMV opens in Inglewood of California. The DMV opens around 8 o'clock, but you'll see people out there around 7 o'clock in the morning standing there with lawn chairs. Some of them bring a chair because they're trying to get in to take care of their DMV business. It is that crazy out here. There's some offices that aren't open. You have to do everything has to be done by phone. Some doctor's offices and clinics done by phone. And then if you are at doctor's offices and clinics, you have to schedule way in advance, and they have all the seats spread out. And you're going to be standing. They do temperature checks before you get in there, and then when you get in there, they're only seeing like maybe a handful of patients at a time per every so many hours. And so that's why they have spread out appointments. So that's what's been happening here in Los Angeles. I'm just giving you an idea, a picture of what's been going on. And you see the background here that I have. It's showing where it says cancel the rent. That's not happening. You notice that? It has not happened. They had all these little groups that were pretty much pumping people up in hopes that they would cancel this rent. Look how they're acting with the talks on the stimulus. You haven't heard when the next $1,200 check's going to come, and that definitely doesn't cover people's rent, from what I'm hearing. The other thing, this is pretty much a mega rundown of some of the things that I've seen. The George Floyd murals that had went up, a lot of them were defaced or they were disposed of, and so they're trying to gather those so they can get those murals and put them in an art display because they have been defaced. Somebody's going around defacing some of those murals in an effort to be blatantly either racist or mean-spirited in doing so. So an aggressive new guerrilla tactic targets America's eviction machine. And so it says on the Daily Beast on Wednesday about 12 hours, the New York's eviction moratorium was set to expire. So protesters got out. And so this is New York. And so New York's not that far away from, how LA does its business. In other words, whatever happens in New York, it seems like LA follows suit. So it says cancel the rent. And we've been seeing that everywhere. And a lot of people are concerned, and rightfully so, because there's an issue with the rents. The rents are being halted, but they're not being canceled. So I keep saying that because I want to forewarn you people. Do not think that they're going to cancel the rent. It doesn't look like that's going to happen. Some places already, they have been evicting people. And I believe the reason why they're not doing it all at once because it would create a huge stir. And a lot of people would be devastated. So they're doing it in pockets. So what they're doing is like maybe one city or one town or one state here, they lift the moratorium. And now people have to figure out what they're going to do. And so now you're used to not being in your apartment or your house, or you had to move everything out. You had to readjust and align yourself to now being newly evicted or newly homeless. So they're working out all of those issues there. And so we're hearing the stories in different parts of, the world on how people are dealing with, or the countries, on how people are dealing with states, let's say states dealing with eviction in terms of the U.S. And so it hasn't hit some of the bigger cities, or it's about to hit the bigger cities. It's coming in a slow wave. So on Wednesday, in 12 hours before New York eviction moratorium was set to expire, protesters piled into the fluorescent lobby of the Brooklyn office buildings, but they weren't visiting elected officials who could extend the moratorium or even landlords they might shame. Instead, the group was targeting lawyers who helped process the city's mountain of impending eviction notices. And so that was the focus. So no landlords, no cops, all evictions gotta stop. Protesters were chanting. They were chanting this repetitively at one or two law offices that they visited that day. So America's on the cusp of eviction crisis. And so that's what I was talking about, with an estimated of 23 million people at risk of losing their homes. Federal eviction moratorium, which barred evictions on government-backed residences to protect millions of Americans who lost income due to COVID-19, expired in late July, with $600 per week COVID unemployment benefit expiring days later after. And so, although some states have their own eviction, so this is where I'm getting at. Some states have their own eviction moratoriums on a wider array of homes. Those are often also slated to expire soon too. So I'm letting you know, forewarning you, it's coming to LA. LA residents, brace yourself, because eviction moratoriums will soon end here. And so, in the last ditch effort to fight lockouts, and after a summer of rage targeted at cops and other symbols of law and order in America, activists aren't content to go after politicians this time. So instead, they want to shut down the machinery of eviction systems. And so the nation's housing courts and the people who make it run. So Wednesday's action in Brooklyn, which also made stops at Brooklyn Borough Hall, a Brooklyn housing court, saw demonstrators march through the law offices that they said did just that. So keep trying to evict tenants, and we'll keep showing up and shutting down your office every day. And the group Housing Justice for All tweeted alongside video of one of the protests. So the other lawyers working for landlords, watch out. We're coming for you next. Calls better tenant protections may be having an impact. So New Yorkers appeared to receive a 1-month extension on Wednesday based on that, I believe, because more people are speaking out on this, but you need to be paying attention to this instead of paying attention to all these other distractors about where's your $1,200 check or when they're going to do these talks about the stimulus. These evictions are coming with fast and ferocious, furious speed. So pay attention to what's going on, because it doesn't matter what check comes. If it comes or if it doesn't come, you won't have a roof to be underneath to see that it comes. So that's more important. Look at what's before you instead of what you don't know whether it's going to happen or not. This eviction thing seems to be an imminent threat right now. So the group continued to protest on Thursday, storming the lobby of another real estate law firm whose website domain name is New York or NY Eviction Lawyer. And so neither of the law offices targeted Wednesday returned to the Daily Beast to a comment of what was going on. So a partner at a third office, Balsamo, Rosenblatt, and Hall, said that he sympathized with the protesters' claims, but they shouldn't have focused on him. So I stopped the evictions. Half of my clients are tenants, Robert Rosenblatt told the Daily Beast. So he was willing to say that. So he's trying to help resolve some of this. So I'm not just landlord's attorney. So he's both. He helps tenants and he helps landlords. So he says, but they think that he's just for the landlord. So they targeted the wrong party today because I prevent homelessness. In a lot of cases, he tries to help people so that they won't become homeless. So he said that he would still continue to represent landlords in eviction proceedings, but I have a family and I have to support my family. So that's the real truth. I have been out of work for 100 days. So Rosenblatt also claimed protesters stole his notary stamps and wrote on the surfaces of his with his markers. And this is not peaceful. And that's not how you get a message across, he said. So that's violence and looting, and it's illegal, and it's a misdemeanor. And so the Crown Heights Tenant Union was among the groups protesting on both days, although the organization declined to comment on Rosenblatt's allegations. Just Dunn, who organizes the CHTU, said the employee tried pushing her and other protesters out of the office. So Rosenblatt, who was not present at the time, accused the protesters of trespassing and rushing in at the employee who tried to keep them out. And Dunn said that the coronavirus pandemic had turned a long simmering crisis, gentrification and evictions in Brooklyn Crown Heights, to a boiling point. So COVID-19 has really exacerbated it, Dunn told the Daily Beast. So this is working class neighborhood, and a lot of folks have lost their jobs and gotten ill and had to take care of their family members and such, and they're at a point that they can't afford to pay their rent. And so getting lawyers to stop filing eviction papers might be a tall order, but some landlords have reportedly proceeded with lockouts despite all of what's going on. So I'm adding that in there, even while prohibited by eviction moratoriums. And so I've been hearing stories like that as well, that people somehow are getting around these moratoriums and they're still able to evict people and lock them out of their apartments. And so even though the New Yorkers can technically appeal their evictions based on COVID-19 economic hardship after the moratorium expires, so the NYC landlords already obtained approximately 14,000 eviction warrants before it took effect, and they may be able to start acting on them as soon as this week. And so, indeed, a discussion forum for landlords and the real estate investing site biggerpockets.com suggested many of them were licking their chops at the chance to clear out tenants nationwide. So it's going to be cutthroat, it's going to be swift, and it's going to hurt. And it's an economic disaster, in the making, and on top of the eviction process that is going to take shape. And it's already starting, and it's starting in like little waves here and there, and then once it hits the cities, people are going to start seeing more of it in the news. It's going to be more evident that it's happening in real time, and I believe that's why there's probably someone sending down instructions to these people that are running these moratoriums, telling them halted 1 more month, halted 2 more months, because if they've lifted an eviction moratorium in one state, they don't want it to happen in 2 and 3 states all at the same time, or 4 states all at the same time, because that would be a total disaster. So they're letting it happen in pockets. It's happening in one state, they maybe wait a couple of weeks, wait a month or 2, and then boom, it happens in the next state. That's the way I'm seeing this going. And then when it comes to LA, boy, and to New York, it's starting, boy, because these are big, populous, mega cities. And so you got a lot of renters that are going to be hit with this. And so that's going to be an even bigger deal, and it's going to be so heavily pronounced on the news. And it may even cause what we're seeing in Chicago happening, where there's looting and there's people that are all in the streets. It may even cause that type of, emotional drawback, where people finally get to the point to say that they've had it. And so I believe that's another reason why they're halting them, because they know that people are already angry about a lot of things that have gone on, with the George Floyd protests, the shootings of Black Americans, some of the other, political drama that we've been seeing lately, even just down to like them talking about making decisions on Capitol Hill or in the White House, or how they're going to, distribute money to different people in different directions. Who needs it? Policy making is that going well? Even about the Medicaid issue, all these poor older people that are probably going to be hit hard with possible cuts to their Medicaid and maybe their Social Security as well. And so this is not looking good. I don't see a silver lining in any of that. And so as it goes, it says, I'm doing that and one tomorrow and hope that the tenants take me up on it. And so the Los Angeles landlord wrote this. And so, like, what did I say? One protester suggested skirting what few protections there are for renters by offering cash for keys to any of the non-paying tenants. And so I am doing that with one tomorrow and in hopes that the tenants take me up on it. And so the Los Angeles landlord wrote. And so that is LA. We were just talking about New York. What did I say? Like anything that happens in New York, it seems like LA follows suit. And so the eviction moratorium may have expired, but the courts are going to be backed up for months dealing with the flood of evictions, which could cost the landlord far more money than simply paying the tenants off and moving on, and not to mention eviction costs money. And so that's another issue that's popping up. Others, like landlords in Washington, urge colleagues to be more discriminating in their tenants and to avoid blue-collar workers who have been disproportionately affected. And so these are people who are like blue-collar workers that they were affected by COVID personally. And one thing is that I think is an important lesson here is not to rent to blue-collar workers, he wrote. And so still others express limited sympathy, you hear that, for some out-of-work tenants, stating that they should be enjoying a windfall of unemployment benefits. They should be making mad unemployment money. One landlord advised another who asked about how to deal with newly out-of-work tenants. I'd consider offering them cash for keys to move out in 2 weeks, or I would start the eviction process. So the $600 weekly bonus has now expired, and even when active, it was notoriously difficult for some to obtain. And the original landlord explained that one of the tenants was ineligible of unemployment because they were on a work visa. And so that is some people's issue. And so you see, it doesn't sound like very many landlords are very empathetic to people's circumstance, even though they know what's going on. So the purpose is to show folks how many moving pieces are part of the system and how many people you really can hold accountable, Dunn said. So Art Against Displacement, another group that participated in the protest, represents renters in Manhattan, Chinatown, the Lower East Side neighborhoods. AAD member Vanessa Phil said that she hoped that the protest would help put faces on to the eviction process and both the eyes of the evicted and the people filing the orders. So we were reading this, okay, you guys, because I want you to see that it's happening everywhere in pockets so that you understand that this is, it seems like there's a system in place here. So there's what one city is doing, another city waits, and then 2 months later the same thing happens. Or it happens in such a fashion that it's the same thing, but it's a different way about evicting people. Or they pick and choose, or they have all these other little programs in process, or they figured out a way to evict people before the moratorium ends. So there's all kinds of stuff going on that I don't think people are aware of. So the demonstrations also, it says that we were there to show them that this is not going to be just pushing through paperwork. And she told the Daily Beast this. So demonstrations were just the latest in the set of nationwide actions targeting the inner workings of the eviction machine. So in New Orleans last week, activists chained themselves together outside of the court to block landlords from filing eviction paperwork. It was very emotional, so they were partially successful. And even if just one day, footage from the scene showed multiple people approaching the court, confronting the wall of protesters turning around without entering. So the court officials contended that the protesters hurt their cause. However, because they blocked other people, and including tenant attorneys as well. Tenant attorneys are there to help tenants stay into their place. They block them from entering. And so activists in Kansas City took a similar approach last week. This is Kansas City. Okay, we went from New York to Los Angeles to parts of Manhattan in New York, and then we went from there to now we were in New Orleans, and now we're in Kansas City. Okay, all sound similar, don't they? It took a similar approach last week, actually entering the courthouse to disrupt eviction proceedings. So 2 people were reportedly arrested, and in Brooklyn, in Brooklyn on Thursday, activists waged their own protests. What did I say? More protests. More protest, more violence, more people trying to stop you from speaking out on issues that are important, like housing and rights of tenants and rights of people to have a place to stay throughout this pandemic. So the protests were outside of the courthouse once again. Ultimately, Brooklyn protesters want a full cancellation of rent. A full cancellation of rent rather than a temporary reprieve. Exactly. Because they know temporary moratoriums do not cancel your rent. They only halt things. And your rent is going to increase each month that you don't pay it. And so if you're out of a job and you're out of work and you stay home or your job is closed and they're not opening back up again, you're going to need somewhere to live. If you don't have any money, you're waiting on an EDD, that's not working out. Jobs are not hiring as readily like they are or they were pre-pandemic because a lot of them had to close because they weren't safe environments to work in the beginning. Although in the White House you have the Democrats and the Republicans haggling over the stimulus package on what they're going to put out and what they're not going to put out, whether it's going to be $1 trillion or $3 trillion or $2 trillion. You know, it's back and forth. It's like a tennis match. You're hanging in limbo, your life's hanging in the balance, and then if you do go back to work, from what I'm hearing, is that people go back to work if they get sick, you're out of a job once again. So ultimately, back on the article, it says the protesters wanted that full cancellation of rent. They know that this is a temporary reprieve that leaves renters in debt later. You're still in debt, in deeper debt, because you didn't have a job to cover the back rent. That was a no fault of your own because your businesses had to close because there were executive orders and mandates in place saying that the business had to close because of the pandemic, because of the risk involved in people spreading the disease. So that can come from landlords or the real estate attorneys, but the elected officials who, as of Thursday, did not seem to close to providing it. And so for now, activists were content to make sure that everyone who had a hand in the system that they loathe was a bit nervous. And so when looking at this issue, it is easy to see that there are a lot of parties not doing the right thing. You think? Yeah, there's a lot not happening that should happen and a lot that's happening that shouldn't happen. So our legislatures are not making choices that would protect folks. Right. We've been seeing this. And this is ugly. Everywhere you look at it, from every corner. So our landlords are not extending human compassion in the middle of a pandemic, Dunn said. And the purpose of today's action was to bring lawyers into the light and to show that they are as complicit as landlords in eviction processes and helping the cycle of displacement to be so destructive. And so this is this right here. Okay? It's really sad. This is what is happening. And I hate to see that we had to do so many of these type of videos like this. But on the flip side, we have a number of Americans that have recently been giving up their citizenship, and that has been skyrocketing. Americans are renouncing their U.S. citizenship in record numbers in 2020, according to the report of Bambridge Accountants New York. So more than twice the number of Americans have given up their U.S. citizenship in the first half of 2020 compared to entirely of 2019. The report said, so in the first 6 months of the year, 5,816 Americans expatriated. According to the report, only 2,072 Americans gave up their citizenship in 2019, so it's a lot more this year. So the first 2 quarters of 2020 logged the highest and second highest numbers of records of Americans renouncing citizenship. The report said in their first 3 months of the year, seeing a record number to 2,909 giving up citizenship until this year. The number of Americans expatriating had been in a steep decline since 2017, the report said. So every 3 months, the U.S. government publishes the names of all people who gave up their citizenship pursuant of Internal Revenue Services rules. And so to renounce their citizenship, Americans must pay $2,350 fee. So Alistair Bambridge, partner in Bambridge Accountants New York, a firm specializing in U.S. expat tax policy, UK expat actors, other creatives in the 2 countries, said he believes the spike is due to COVID-19 politics and taxes. You think? I think so, yeah. After what I just read. So the huge increase in the U.S. expats renouncing. From our experience is the current pandemic has allowed individuals the time to review their ties to the U.S. and decide the current political climate and annual U.S. tax reporting is just too much to bear, he said in a report. So he added that American citizens living abroad are still required to file U.S. taxes every year and report all of their foreign bank accounts, pensions, and investments. So for many Americans, this intrusion is too complicated, and they make the serious step of renouncing their citizenship as they do not plan to return to live in the U.S., Bamford said. So there's a lot going on, guys. A lot of people have had it up to here. And so we're seeing a lot of this going on. We're also seeing more homelessness going on because of these things that are happening. It is crazy. I'm telling you, it is just really crazy. A lot of crazy stuff going on. So LA County's temporary eviction moratorium, consumer and business. California extends the moratorium on evictions through September, July the 2nd. So the Los Angeles County Board of Supervisors, it's saying that last week extended its own moratorium, local moratorium on evictions through to at least July 30th. The residents and commercial tenants countrywide moratorium applies to all local jurisdictions unless they have enacted their own moratorium. So every state has different, in their cities, they have different types of moratoriums. And some have ended sooner than others. They don't all end at the same time in a blanket. Like they're boom, in a blanket effect. They end in sort of like a domino effect, I would say. So one ends here, like if it ends in Georgia, the moratorium, then a month later, the moratorium ends in Louisiana. A month later, it ends in Milwaukee. A month later, it ends, or 2 months later, it ends in LA, And as an example given, they didn't just want to say screw it, let's just end all the moratoriums all at once, because that would be high level chaos. So I believe that is the reason why we're seeing these things happening, because some of these places are now starting to feel the effects of eviction moratoriums ending, or either it's not holding, the net is not holding now, the net is splitting, it's opening up, it's the holes are getting wider in this net in some places. And so that's pretty much what's going on. It's what it's looking like to me. And so, anyway, I just want to forewarn you guys to protect yourself, your families, because I don't see this getting really any better. It looks like there's going to be some chaos that might ensue. Some already started. There's more violence, high levels of violence, because I don't know if you've seen the article also where there were people protesting for Breonna Taylor. They have yet to apprehend the killers. I think two of them were let off on like a paid leave, and that means they still have their jobs. One, I believe, might have been released from the job. I'm not sure to that effect, but they're not incarcerated for killing her. And so recently, Oprah, she put out 26 billboards to call for the, you know, justice for Breonna Taylor, and then there has been some protests behind that, and some of those protests have gotten pretty heated and intense. It's even gotten to the point where they've prohibited protesters from using the roads. Now they're trying to block them, or they're trying to ban them from using the roads. So it has gotten crazy, you guys. And in Chicago, there was a shooting that was a police involved shooting, and there was a lot of unrest in parts of Chicago, in some of the cities of Chicago, and I don't know if you saw that, but it's unraveling. The net is widening, and there's some holes in the nets that are starting to split, and so it'll soon come to Los Angeles. And I just say brace yourself, because do not trust all this stuff about cancel the rent. That's what you would want them to do. But hey, look at what's happening with this package, how they're acting with that. You really believe they're going to cancel the rent? I don't think so. And then, you hear all the complaints about EDD. Some people haven't still are waiting on checks. They're still waiting on money that hasn't arrived. And like I told you in LA, I don't know if it's happening in your part of town, in California, in LA, parts of LA, there's some backlog of mail. There's some mail that doesn't even get delivered. You have to go pick your mail up. You can't forget the mailbox. You're not getting any mail until you pick it up. You gotta wait till the end of the week, and then you gotta stand in a long line. You gotta social distance just to wait for your mail to come. So yeah, there's a lot going on behind this COVID-19 than people are letting on, and they're not telling everyone what's really happening. And so you can't even get your mail here in South LA. Some people haven't seen their mail in 3 months during the whole pandemic. Then 3 or 4 months. Every week you have to go to the postal office just to pick up your mail. That has become a huge problem. So these evictions, I've heard some people have already gotten served notices that, their days are numbered. There's some landlords who have changed locks on doors. Some landlords have changed the locks, believe it or not. They've locked tenants out of their place because they have not for non-payment of rent. So having said that, I'm going to let this go. What do you think about this? This is crazy. I mean, it's not going to get any better, guys, but you need to keep yourself grounded. You need to see what is going on. Stop thinking that this is not coming your way, because you need to get prepared, is what I'm saying, because this is going to be a catastrophe. It already is, but it's a catastrophe that's coming in a slow wave. And once that wave hits, boom, it's just gonna hit. it's gonna hurt a lot of folks. Having said that, I'm gonna let this video go. Take care of yourselves and try to do the best you can with what you have, and um, just be resilient. Keep your eyes and your ears open, and I feel like if people are more into reading and staying afloat, mentally on what is going on, and knowing, keeping their mind clear, so that they can see, okay, this is how we'll attack this. This is how we'll approach this. You might have a fighting chance. If you just assume that this stuff is going to disappear, that might not be the right way to look at it. Having said this, I'm going to let this video go. Like, comment, subscribe, and thanks for listening.